Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I am your host, Mark Philpott, and on the show I talk to people all over the world about their amazing travel experiences. Oh yeah, we are living in very exciting times, that's for sure. I hope you're all doing well out there. Many of us around the world are currently in lockdown situation, which is allowing us to binge listen to podcasts, which is a great thing, and it's been really amazing. The numbers for my show have gone through the roof in the last couple of weeks, which is exciting. So I know there's many people out there hurting at the moment, and my heart and sympathy goes out for you, but maybe while you're at home you can listen to some podcasts. Wouldn't that be a good idea? Now, on today's show, we're going to stick with the trend of talking about travel, but we're going to do something a little bit different, and it's quite exciting. I'm pretty excited about this. My guest and I today are going to help you put together a travel itinerary. Yes, we're going to actually help you plan a trip. And my guest is in love with an African country. The country is called Zimbabwe. So we're going to find out all about Zimbabwe. And we're going to get her recommendations on where are the best places to go and what are the best things to do if you were to take a holiday to Zimbabwe. So why don't we introduce my guest right now to the show, and her name is Dot Becker. Dot, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show.
Thank you. I'm loving being back here. Thank you very much, Mark.
Well, it's great, and it's been way too long since we last spoke. And for the listeners who haven't listened, and I think there's only about 5 people in the world that haven't listened to your show with me last time, Dot. But if you haven't listened to Dot's show with me about her amazing journey from Barcelona down to Zimbabwe in her blue van, then it's time you got onto the website and checked it out, because it was amazing. And today is, well, I don't want to say it's a follow-up. It's another opportunity for us to have a chat about your amazing country, really, isn't it?
Yes, thank you. I love talking about Zimbabwe. In case people want to know, but I'm Zimbabwe born and raised. But I left here a very long time ago, 38 years ago. And my drive back was to come back home. And I love the opportunity to talk about the amazing things that people don't know about Zimbabwe and why it should be on everybody's bucket list.
I totally agree. But before we get into that, I'm going to stay strong with my usual rules and policies on my show, and that is that you have to dedicate this show to someone special in your life. So who are you going to send this one out to today, Dot?
Oh my Lord, this was a surprise. I haven't given that any thought at all. Can I dedicate it to somebody who's not with us in the world, or does it have to be somebody who's with us in the world?
No, it doesn't have to be somebody that's with us at all.
I would love to dedicate it to my late husband, who now that I'm back in the country where we met and we got married, many places just remind me of him, and I wish that he was here to share those with me.
That's beautiful. What was his name, Dot?
His name was Frank Reed.
Frank Reed. There you go, Frank. I'm sure you're listening to us somewhere. I'm sure there's a podcast antenna up in the sky. So Frank will be listening in, and I think that's a beautiful dedication, Dot. Thank you for that today.
Thank you.
Zimbabwe, there's a lot of people, I'm guessing, who are listening who, if I showed them a map of the world, they would probably struggle in identifying exactly where Zimbabwe is. So can you give us, out there that haven't spent a lot of time in Africa, can you give us a kind of a geographical lesson on exactly where Zimbabwe is in Africa?
Sure. It's, there are 54 countries that fall within Africa as a continent, including islands. And even for me, it took me quite some time to learn North Africa, so I can understand that not everybody understands it. I'm from Southern Africa, so if you looked at Africa, the southern part of Africa, most people recognize South Africa, which is the bottom section of Africa. And then Zimbabwe is directly above South Africa, so our border to the south is with South Africa. And then we have Mozambique, if you're looking at a map, Mozambique to the right, Botswana to the left, and Zambia above us. So we are a landlocked country.
Very interesting, isn't it? Because I think I've spoken to people before, and for some reason they think Zimbabwe's on the coast, but it's not. It is a landlocked country, as you said, and it's bordering the other four countries, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Mm.
We
So,
we Sorry, yes,
sorry.
it's just four countries, although we have a little bit of section. There's a unique place on the Zambezi River, which is our northern border, where the Caprivi Strip from Namibia meets Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. So we kind of have a little pitch of a corner that meets Namibia.
Oh, okay. What's the longest border crossing? Is that Botswana? Is that the longest border?
I would guess yes. I haven't measured it.
Yeah, right.
I'm
Next
sorry.
time
I was not totally prepared for that question. Yes, but I would guess. Well, to be honest, our border with Mozambique along the east is quite a long, straight one. But otherwise, yes, I would guess it would be. It would. I don't know. I think it's a toss-up between Mozambique and Botswana, really.
Hey, I was going to say, tongue in cheek, next time you're out there in your van, I'd like you to go and measure it for us, please.
No problem.
Now, what's the population roughly of Zimbabwe?
Well, so many Zimbabweans leave all the time and come back. And the government is, sort of got more pressing issues, which I won't define here. So we guesstimate somewhere between 14 and 16 million.
Right, okay. I was going to ask, when you say they all go and come back, do they come back in vans?
No, only crazy old white women do that,
So you are a unique person within the population.
I am quite so, indeed. I don't think anybody else has driven back home that way. Mostly they don't believe me. They go, yes, but how did you cross the ocean? You must have shipped. And I go, no, I didn't. I went from a ferry from Barcelona to Morocco, and then I drove. And they're like,
right. Yeah, incredible. Now, there's quite a few languages in Zimbabwe, but what are the couple of most common ones that are used on a daily basis?
It's very, we have a number of tribes, so it's really tribal based. The main tribes being the Shona in the north, the Matabele more or less in the southwest, and we have Tonga, Venda. So we have, but Shona and Ndebele being the main languages here, and
Okay.
it's an English-speaking country. What used to be a British colony, so English is really the working language of the country.
And the two major cities in the country?
The two major cities are Harare, which is the capital city in the north, and Bulawayo, or Bulawayo as they call it locally, is where I'm from, my hometown, and where I am at the moment speaking to you from. And that is in the sort of southwest.
Okay. So if you've now listened to what Dot's just explained to us, you would have a rough idea whereabouts in the African continent the country of Zimbabwe sits, and you'll have an idea that Harare in the north and Bulawayo is in the south. So there you go. That gives you some kind of proximity to the country we're talking about today. Now, the country is probably more known around the world when I mention a certain person's name other than yours, Dot, of course, and that would be Robert Mugabe. So a lot of people around the world would have heard of his name on the news for all sorts of different reasons. He ruled the country between 1987 and 2017, and I think it would be fair to say that he left a lasting impression on the country, Dot.
Yes, his legacy is not one that anyone should be proud of. For all his years in power, as promising as he started off, unfortunately, as always is the case when leaders want to be in power for too long and to be in perpetual power, they tend to corrupt more than they actually do good. So unfortunately, that is the legacy that's been left, and the country hasn't recovered from that, and our current leadership isn't likely to set a better tenor or tone.
Well, I'm going to stay true to myself on my show and make sure that we have an upbeat and positive conversation today about your country. So we'll leave that side of it behind us because
Totally, I
our
agree.
our intention today is to try and stimulate the tourist market coming into Zimbabwe. So I thought it might be a fun idea today for us to actually plan a travel itinerary for my listeners who might want to come to Zimbabwe and have a look around. And with you as the expert, Dot, you can give us a great journey into your country and where are some of the best places to go, what to do, and all of the other things. Would you be open to that?
I'd be absolutely happy to do that.
Okay, good. So I think in terms of, it's a little bit like when you go to Europe. I think a lot of people travel to Africa and they try and take on a number of different countries at once and not just fly into one and fly out. And I'm generalizing, of course, because it all depends on what time, how much time you've got for your vacation and all the rest of it. But chances are people that have gone to Africa have tried to have a look at a couple of different countries. So we could assume that people go into South Africa and have a good look around. But Zimbabwe being relatively just up the road is a country that you can shoot into and get to see some amazing things. So as far as the logistics of getting into Zimbabwe, Dot, what's the best entry points for people to fly into these days?
To fly in, I would recommend if you're doing the route that I'm taking you on today, the easiest option would be to fly into Victoria Falls, and because that's an international airport and it's very easy to get into there, and you can get an easy connection from Johannesburg, or if you were flying into Namibia, you could get an easy connection from Namibia or even from Gaborone in Botswana. So getting to Victoria Falls would, I would say, be your easiest stop. A number of people think that they have to fly into the capital, and our capital city is, of course, our capital city. But to be honest, the route that I'm going to take you on just makes a lot more sense. So flying into either Bulawayo or into Victoria Falls, but my recommendation would be to start at Victoria Falls.
Well, that's great, and I think that's really interesting to know because I think we do get stuck into our head sometimes that it's more advantageous to fly into the bigger cities and start our trips from there all over the world when we fly into a country. But these days, that's certainly not the case with different and new airports coming online that are maybe making it logistically easier. So if we were flying into Victoria Falls, what can we expect as far as our first on-the-ground experience from there?
Well, firstly, the reason I suggest Victoria Falls is that we are fortunate to have one of the 7 natural wonders of the world in Victoria Falls lying within our country. So we have the Victoria Falls is 1.7 kilometers wide. It is the largest waterfall in the world, and it is absolutely stunning. It was quite controversial recently because everybody to press an agenda of climate change, they filmed it at its lowest season, when parts of it are dry. Nature isn't like Disneyland. It doesn't have an on-off switch. It ebbs and flows. So they filmed it or photographed it at a time when a section of it is always normally dry. And they were like, oh, there's this climate change, which devastated a lot of our tourism industry because people weren't coming. However, a large section of Victoria Falls lies within view from our side, and we get the best part of the falls, fortunately. But it's now in full flow. There've been floods upriver, and it's absolutely stunningly gorgeous. So Victoria Falls is an absolute must. There's a beautiful bridge that crosses over from Victoria Falls to Zambia, it's an old, one of those arched iron bridges, which has a railway across it as well. So that's beautiful. So the Victoria Falls, it's a very strange sort of configuration. So it falls into a gorge, and then the gorge zigzags further down the river, and the water, of course, flows that way. And you can one of the things that one must do in Victoria Falls is go to the old colonial Victoria Falls Hotel and have a classic English high tea, and get a wonderful view of the gorge. I remember sitting there during the war years, and you had to be careful that you weren't shot at. So it was a
Mm,
strange memory.
mm.
But there's also a new little cafe down a little bit further up between the falls and the hotel called the Lookout Cafe, and that has a gorgeous view of the gorge as well. So that will definitely keep you busy, and there's a little bit of rainforest attached to the falls where you can see some amazing flowers, depending on the time of year that you're actually coming. And there is some extensive information about the geography and the flow of the river and how it was formed, etc., on information boards as you come in. So it's definitely an informative, but also very beautiful place. Now, Victoria Falls was named such by David Livingstone, and those
Mhm.
people with an English background will know about David Livingstone, one of the first explorers of Africa. And this was the spot where David Livingstone actually found, he didn't find it because it was always there, but his discovery of it to the Western world.
Right. Now, I think it's important before we go any further because you've talked about the rain season, etc. What, in your opinion, or when, in your opinion, is the best time of the year to visit Zimbabwe?
Oh, it depends on what you want to do. So presently, it's our rainy season, but we don't get as much rain as they do in North Africa or West Africa. So it's Victoria Falls is beautiful, pretty much from sort of February, March, April, May, June, and then it starts to then it starts to ebb down. But even the driest months for the Victoria Falls are probably October, November, December, um,
Mm.
when it can be quite dry. But it's still the most magnificent piece of sort of nature. If you want to, the next stop that I'm going to take you on will be to the nature reserves. Now, the nature reserves, our winter is in Europe's summer, in the Northern Hemisphere summer. So um, our winter season is our dry season, and it's the season in which you get to see most of the game because there are fewer watering holes, and so they congregate more to central watering holes. As there's less water out in nature for them. And then you can get to see a lot more game, as well as the fact that the bush is drier and not quite so green and lush. Well, not that we
Yeah.
have a lot of lushness, but still.
Dot, I'm still back at the Victoria Falls.
Sorry,
Can I
yes.
ask you a question? Can
Yes.
I ask you a question about that for a second? As far as helping people kind of plan their itinerary as we're going through today, what kind of timeline would you suggest, or how long would you suggest people stay around the Victoria Falls area for?
The Victoria Falls is the main thing to see there. Certainly, there's a sort of a village that's worth going to. I would say that 2 to 3 days. If you arrive, you take it easy. Have a sundowner. Sundowners are have a drink, watch the sun go down. It's a tradition here. Relax, take it easy. I think that's
Yeah.
really important when you make that transition into Africa. Is not to set yourself a wow, what's next, relax, enjoy Africa. This is Africa. Take it easy. Just
Mm.
let things go. But 2 to 3 days, I would say, 2 days, 2.5 days, then you can move on to wherever you're going, to the next stop, I would suggest. There is a nature reserve. So if people are just flying into Victoria Falls just to see the falls, that's doable. Then I would suggest that you take maybe three days so that you can go to the nature reserve that's in very close proximity to the falls,
Mm.
and but it's not. It doesn't have as much game as the reserve I'm taking you to next.
I'm glad that you talked about the mood of the country because that's really important and something we don't probably talk too much about when we're thinking about going to a specific country for a holiday. And you've made it quite clear that it's all about really chilling out and relaxing, and that's really the vibe of the country, isn't it?
Yeah, we have amazing people here. Our local population are friendly, helpful. Um, they're just super, super wonderful people, intelligent, smart. You can have great conversations with them. And, but this is Africa. I think the one problem that I found, especially when I was overlanding, was people who had an expectation that this was like the Western world. It isn't. It's Africa. Appreciate it for what it is.
Mm. Yeah, don't come expecting you're going to get what you've got at home, because that's the whole reason why you leave home, is to go and try something new.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that why you're coming somewhere new and different?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe not, but whatever. I mean, the standards are very high here. Your hotels, you could go to a guest house, you would get an exceptional standard. But just the standards of accommodation, etc., are very good. But yeah, just relax, take it easy, enjoy.
Now you're going to run us around. You're going to run us around the country today to some highlights. Now, if people are flying into Victoria Falls, what's the best form of logistics planning when it comes to transportation? Should people hire a car, or how should they get from place to place within the country?
You can certainly hire a car. It's pretty much easy to do. You can also hire a car, a guide, a guide and a car. So that's also very doable and very affordable, really. Um, yeah, I think self-driving is very easy to do. I understand that some people may be concerned, and I would say that all you need to do in Zimbabwe is use the same protocols that you would use at home. You know, don't
Yep.
come here and leave your car open with all your luggage in it and think that it's, and the keys in the ignition, and think that it's still going to be there when you get back. Because it ain't.
Yeah.
Hopefully it will be, but it possibly. I think just use common sense and but otherwise you'll be perfectly safe. It's not the people here, while we have some political problems, it's not a dangerous country to visit, and that's something that I absolutely want to share with people, is that really it's not a danger, but at the same time it's like people are people all over the world. Be careful with your things. If you're rushing around with your cameras and your bags with money hanging out and all the rest of it, of course everybody's going to see you as a target. So, just that would be happen to you in Barcelona or in, Amsterdam or London or wherever. So just use some caution. But you can easily do a self-drive, and if you didn't want to, you can certainly get sort of little tours that take you from one place to another. So that's very easy to organize as well.
Oscar's just asked me to ask you, how much would it cost to get a driver and a car for a day to drive around roughly?
I would guess that if we're talking in US dollars, sort of, it really depends. It's a tough question to answer because economically things go up and down here on a daily basis. Um, I would guess that could probably, if you could probably find somebody who'd do it for you for 100 US a day. But don't count on that. Do some homework before you come, simply because things are changing here all the time economically. And I haven't personally researched it, so but I do know that those services are available.
What's the culture when it comes to arranging things like that? Is there a bit of a bartering system in place where it's highly negotiable, or is it a?
Yeah, you could certainly barter. At the same time, if you thought that was a fair price, then somebody going all the way, driving you and whatever have you, and giving you lots of local information and stuff like that. And if you thought that was a fair price, then pay it. If you don't think it's a fair price, then barter. If you said to them, I do it for $80, then leave it to them to make the decision. But some people think that okay, so I'll pay you for a day. Would you work for $30 a day? Is the question. Zimbabwe, unfortunately, is not super cheap. People come thinking that we're super cheap, and unfortunately, that's not the case. But it is certainly a holiday of a lifetime, and certainly 100% worth the money that you'll spend. That's not to say that it's super expensive, but it is not a holiday to Ibiza.
is there a mentality of tipping in the country? So do people who, like taxi drivers, etc., expect to be tipped on arrival as well?
There's not necessarily a culture of tipping, but
Mm.
tipping is always gratefully received. If you think somebody was super friendly and super helpful, then certainly it's something that it is gratefully accepted, because all these people, the guy that you're looking at is not only feeding himself, but he is feeding his family and his extended family as well. So, every person that you look at is probably looking after 20 other people.
Now, as far as, okay, so we've left Victoria Falls and now we're going to head off to a nature park. And what distances are we talking about in terms of having to travel to get on to the next part of our itinerary here?
It's about an hour and a half. So it's not
Okay.
a huge distance. There's not a lot in between there. You'll pass through a town called Hwange, Hawnge, and we're just beyond Hwange is Hwange National Park. And Hwange National Park is one of the 7 top national parks within Southern Africa. And and the great thing about Hwange National Park, and why Zimbabwe is such a jewel, is that it's not cram jammed with tourists like Namibia is. So I was horrified when I was in Namibia's big game reserve. There were people driving like it was the motorway
Wow.
on the M25 in London. I was like, man, what are you doing? You're in nature here looking for animals. Take the time. And I've heard lots of stories about that being similar in some big game reserves in South Africa and Botswana. But in Zimbabwe, the game drives that you can do, so you can self-drive your game drive, or you can book into a lodge, or one of the one of the parks, one of the reserves within the park, and that you can get a game drive with an experienced game ranger, which is always worth doing, absolutely worth doing. What you would do is go for a game drive, and it's not crowded. There aren't, if you see, like I saw cheetah, and they must have in Etosha, and there were 30 vehicles surrounding these poor animals. It was like being at the zoo, except the people were in cars. And Hwange is not like that at all, and super. We have a huge population of elephants there. We have all the big 5. So, your lion, your leopard, your rhino, elephants, and buffalo. And yeah, just an amazing park where you'll see wonderful, wonderful animals. I do a shout out to the Painted Dog Reserve. So painted dogs are wild dogs, and if you see them in nature, they are super cute and wonderful. They're one of my favorite animals to see, and I have been fortunate enough to see them there. But they are in difficult situation in terms of being on the extinction register. So yes, it's spend as long as you like there. If you just want to do a couple of game drives, then spend 2 days. Spend 3 days if you really want to relax and enjoy it. And there are some amazing lodges and amazing places that you can stay, both at the top of the range, and if you just do a national parks place that's at the bottom of the range, it's clean, but no frills. And so you can budget for whatever your budget suits, you can do it.
As far as eating now, in terms of all of these places that have self-made accommodation, do they have food outlets attached or restaurants inside, or can you go out and get food at other places?
No, so you could go to one of the lodges to have a meal there, probably. So there are some hotels and you can certainly have meals at the hotels. However, the thing to know is that here the sun goes down at 6 o'clock, more or less. It's in summer it's a little bit longer, in winter it's a little bit shorter. But around 6 o'clock, there's a deadline. There's a curfew. 6 o'clock, everybody must be in a camp. So once it hits 6 o'clock, you can't be driving around, because actually it's very perilous to be driving around, because unless you won't see within your headlights an elephant on the side of the road, and if you go shooting past it, it might take offense and come at you. And you just don't want any of that stuff happening. So always listen to the curfew. So if you're going to a self-catering place, take food with you. There's usually a little bar fridge there, so you can keep things cold. But if you're going to one of the lodges, the food will be wonderful, and will, you can certainly take up any meals that you want. My recommendation is if you wanted to stop at one of the lodges and have a nice lunch, and then make sure that you went to your budget accommodation, your self-catering accommodation in the evening.
So let's talk about the types of food. What types of cuisine are on offer here at some of these places?
This is Africa, meat. If you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you're going to have to make sure that they are well aware of that before, as soon as possible, so that they can, and they will come up, because we do have lovely fresh vegetables, and everything is grown locally, so it's not shipped 5,000 kilometers to get to you. But it's often more challenging, but certainly always doable. But meat is always a big thing on the menu here. Africans are big meat eaters. So you can expect, any of the local dishes that are sometimes on the menu, which is sadza, which is maize meal, with a gravy with meat. Barbecues, or braais, as they're called locally, are always a possibility. That they're often a fun, outdoor way to enjoy the fabulous weather that we have here. So yeah, a braai is often.
So the tip there would be to have the diet under control before you left home to come to Zimbabwe, so that you can load up while you're there.
Yeah, the food is good. The food is good, and it's diverse, and it depends on who your chef is, but it's a very international sort of cuisine, mixed in with some local things. But even the local diet is relatively simple.
Okay. Now you talked about if we're looking at that window of months in the middle of the year, May, June, July, what can we expect in terms of daytime temperatures during that period of the year?
It can go up to 25, but it will be cold at night. So our temperatures here in Zimbabwe, in the main, so even here in Bulawayo, the temperature will be 30, it was 35 the other day, but I still sleep with a sheet and a blanket over me, because it really cools down at night. It gets down to about 15 degrees. So, which is like most people in Europe summer temperatures, but here it's pretty cold.
Yeah, yeah.
But so in winter, it can vary between 15 to 25. So it's quite a difference, because our days are sunny. So the only thing that cools it down is the fact that our nights are, of course, clear. So the heat from the earth just evaporates. So at night it can go somewhere between 5 and 10. Very seldom you get some. Usually in August it can get colder. So bring a jacket, a light jacket, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's a good tip, and we are talking about Celsius degrees here, everybody. So if you're
Sorry,
listening
yes,
to,
Celsius. I have no idea what that translates into Fahrenheit.
Listening to Dot talking about 35, etc., we're talking about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and getting down to a little bit cooler at night time. So good tip there to bring a jacket and make sure you stay warm in the evenings. Okay, so we've gone into the game reserves, and we've had a look around there, and we've decided that when the sun goes down, we don't want to be on the dinner plate of the wild animals. So we're going to make sure we locked it away in our accommodation.
And please, everybody, do not get out of your vehicle. Every single year, somebody thinks that they're terribly smart and can beat the wildlife. And really, do not get out of your vehicles. Respect that these animals, this is their playground, and respect them, because you will see some awesome sights. But please, they're not your kitty cat at home. They are lions and leopards. They like to eat meat. So please respect the wildlife and don't feed any animals ever.
Yeah, very good tip there as well. Have you talked before about some of the species being endangered? Have you got a big problem in Zimbabwe with poaching?
Well, because our economy has taken a dive, poaching is absolutely a problem. Mainly because people are poaching for the pot. To eat. So poaching is a constant issue for us, as it is everywhere in Africa. But we have some great rangers. We have amazing local people who do terrific jobs on the grounds, and do their very best, and sometimes die in the interchange between poachers and guardians. So rangers.
Okay.
So yeah.
So we leave the game park, and where do we go to next?
Well, now you have an option if you really wanted to. It's just a little aside. It's not my main route because I think my main route is a much more interesting one. But you can go from just near Hwange and Hwange Game Reserve. There is a turnoff to Lake Kariba and a place called Milibisi or Binga. And Lake Kariba is the largest dam by volume in the world. It's very low at the moment, but we are hoping that the floods that are coming over the waterfall at the moment will fill up our dam again. She's a hydroelectric dam, and there is a route where you can go from Milibisi across on the lake on a ferry to the town of Kariba, which is on the other end. So the waterfall comes in on the west end, and then the river flows to the sea on the east, coming out at the Indian Ocean. It's the Zambezi River. So if you're looking at a map, it's the Zambezi River. Victoria Falls is sort of very near the point, the tip of the teapot. And we look at it like a teapot. It's very near the tip of the teapot, and the river runs along that northern border. So Kariba is on the eastern side of that lake, and you can get very easily from Kariba through down to up across to Mana Pools and then down to Harare. So that's a route that if you could also take, but you would need a 4x4. Or well, you don't have to have a 4x4, but unless you're an experienced driver like me, you can do it in a two-wheel drive. But the road is the road is not great. But well, you could do it in a two-wheel drive because you take the ferry across to Kariba. So then you're okay. But don't try to drive that road because it's a bit rough. But that's an alternative. But I'm going to take you back. So going to from Hwange, we go head sort of south towards Bulawayo, which is where I am. And Bulawayo has a very interesting history for a number of reasons. So it is Zimbabwe's first city. So it was the first city that was built in the current day Zimbabwe, colonial city that was built. It is also called the City of Kings because our king was, of the local people, the Ndebele, was King Logobungula, and he had his royal palace just outside the city of Bulawayo. In negotiations with Cecil John Rhodes, eventually, I don't really want to go into the whole colonial history of it, but Cecil John Rhodes built his city just outside the palace sort of Lobengula and called it Bulawayo, which means place of the slaughter. So I'll leave that bit of history up to you. And it is so it's called the City of Kings because we had a kingdom. You know, there was a kingdom. This is the City of Kings, and there are still some royal chiefs in our population. So it's called the City of Kings, and we were an industrial center. A lot of our industry is gone because of the economy, but we're still trying to revitalize that. And we were the center of the railways. So this was a railway hub for the country, and our railways still run. As well as the fact that we, as a city, Cecil John Rhodes laid out the center of the city. Cecil John Rhodes is the person who Rhodesia, which was pre-Zimbabwe, the colonial name for Zimbabwe, he laid out a grid style for the city, and our roads are very wide. So you will have side on, sort of front on parking, so your nose facing the pavement on each side, and a center lane of parking, and then still have two lanes. So that's how wide our roads are. Yeah, very wide. But Cecil John Rhodes wanted to be able to, in each crossroad, to be able to turn around a span of 16 oxen. Because of course in those days they used oxen and carts. And in one of the festivals many, many years ago when I was growing up, I actually saw somebody do that. That was quite stunning. So our streets are very wide, and it's a wonderful city. It has still has a lot of beautiful colonial architecture to have a look at. And what's unique about Bulawayo is that we're so centrally located. So from Bulawayo, about 40 minutes outside of our town, we have the Matobo Hills and the Matobo National Park. In the Matobo National Park, you can see wildlife. It's not not like you could see in Hwange, but I have seen rhino there and antelope and zebra. But the Matobo Hills is a UNESCO landscape site, and it is formed by balancing rocks of granite. So the wind and the weather have weathered these rocks over millennia to form amazing structures of balancing rocks, and it's really very, very unique. And there are some beautiful outlook points where you can get a beautiful view across the whole area. Cecil John Rhodes is actually buried in one of the dolomite rocks there, as are some of his mercenary. There are some old colonial statues to the mercenaries, his mercenary army. So it is a wonderful, beautiful place to visit, and it's also the site of some amazing San Bushman cave paintings. So you'll see some very pristine cave paintings there as well. Unfortunately, in the early days, some people thought that they could preserve the paintings by putting linseed oil on them, and have consequently destroyed them. But there are still some areas where you can, if you want to hike, this is a wonderful place to hike. And you can go and walk up to some of the very beautiful caves and the cave paintings.
Dot, how far is it in terms of driving distance to go from the game park down to Bulawayo?
It's about 4 to 5 hours, depending on the speed that you're driving.
Okay. It's a trip you probably want to make, middle of the day or so. So you're into Bulawayo by sunset, obviously, and get yourself organised with your accommodation and that. You wouldn't be heading off too late in the day to do that trip, obviously.
No, my recommendation in Africa is travel early. If you're an early bird, travel early, because you won't encounter the heat of the day, and you can. I find it nothing more pleasant than driving in the nice, cool early mornings. But then if you're a late bird, then that might not be your thing. But yes, certainly you want to leave sort of at least by mid-morning to make sure that you get into the city in time. And there is a variety of accommodations. So we have hotels, we have lots of lodges and guest houses, and there are Airbnb places. So there's a lot of scope and variety. So you can choose. I think the least that you'll pay is probably about $35 a night, up to whatever it is that you please.
When we're coming to Zimbabwe, is it a place where you would recommend booking all your accommodation beforehand, or is it flexible enough that you can pick up things as you go along?
Our peak season is December, January, because everybody, that's our summer holidays. So everybody's on holiday. The factories are closed. The schools are closed. It's the holiday season. So literally from the beginning to middle of December to the middle of January, you might find it difficult to get accommodation. Okay. The rest of the time, if you have something that you specifically want, I would book it. But if not, you're bound to find something. There would have to be an exceptional reason for you not to. It's always worth checking before you go. So, for instance, in Bulawayo, we have an international trade fair. So that happens in April and won't be happening this year because of the lockdown. But at that time of the year, because we have a lot of international visitors, then it does get quite busy. But there's usually somewhere that you can find.
I was going to ask you about festivals. Are there a lot of festivals throughout the year in Zimbabwe?
Things pop up and crop up, but not really. Nothing of the scale that you would get like Glastonbury or sort of those sorts of big festivals. Not presently, no.
Okay. Now, you did make reference a little while ago about the railway system. A lot of people listening to the show might be railway fanatics and love travelling on a train. Is that something that's a doable option in Zimbabwe?
Yes, there is an option to. There's somebody has just revitalized one of the carriages, a couple of carriages, to take a train from Bulawayo up to Hwange. So you get to a place called Det, and you then get to take a safari, and you can book accommodation if you like on one of the lodges, and then you can come back again, or you can just take a safari and then come back again. So you can take a one-way trip or a two-way trip. It's up to you. But that's very limited. So it's only 14 people at a time. It travels on specific days. So you would need to have a look at it. And if anybody is particularly interested in traveling any of these things, please send me a note, and I will happily send you details of any of these organizations or places. But that's happened. But we have a wonderful, amazing, interesting railway museum here, which is absolutely a place that you must visit, especially if you're a steam train enthusiast or any of those sorts of things. So yes, definitely Bulawayo is a place for all rail enthusiasts to stop by. There are still trains that run to Johannesburg. I can't tell you what the condition of state of those is, but apparently they still run frequently, but they would be running with diesel engines. I remember traveling down to Cape Town when I left Zimbabwe in 1981, and we left on a train and had a steam engine all the way up to about Johannesburg. And yes, I remember you had to close the roof of the carriage, otherwise you got the soot inside.
So, any idea how long the train takes from Bulawayo down to Joburg?
I think it's about 24 hours, more or less. I did look. I confess I didn't check that particular fact, but it's about a day and something to do that. It's at least an overnight, so you do have to do an overnight.
Overnight, okay. So for everyone listening today, I'm going to put Dot's contact details in the show notes, and I'm going to also do my research on spelling some of these place names correctly so that you can...
Happy to send you.
have all those as well, because some of them are tongue twisters, and you might get a few vowels and consonants out of place if you left it up to me. So, okay, we're in Bulawayo. What do you suggest we do next?
We also have just outside our city, about 20 kilometers outside of town, a place called Kami Ruins. And it was the capital of the Butua state, sorry, even some twisting for me sometimes. And it was built and occupied between 1450 to 1644. So a lot of people think that Africa has nothing ancient or unique about it. And that's not true at all. There are about 200 of these types of sites around southern Africa, around Zimbabwe, and there are a couple in Mozambique, leading to a very great kingdom, and which I'll tell you about after we've finished with Bulawayo. Kami Ruins is a UNESCO site, and it's packed stone. It's a specific packed stone without any mortar. And they have built terraces, and the terraces are retained by sloping packed stone with intricate patterns of sort of diamond shapes and zigzags and sort of like a twisted corn sort of pattern in sort of built within the walls. It is a fascinating place to go and see, and full of very unique history. So that's definitely another must-see when you are in Bulawayo. Yeah. So from Bulawayo, we now get to go southeast to a town called Mutare. And in Mutare, so that's another sort of four hours drive, is a place called Great Zimbabwe. Now, it was the capital of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe between the 11th and 15th century. Now, this is the place where our country gets its name from. So our country is Zimbabwe, and it takes its name from the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, which spread throughout, as I said, throughout the southern sort of section of Zimbabwe, and present-day Zimbabwe and some of Mozambique, our adjacent neighbor. Now, the site is large. It's very big. It's about 7 square kilometers, and it used to house up to 1,800 people. It is the largest sub-Saharan ancient man-made structure.
Wow.
And it's just the most unique site that everybody should see. It has a very special sort of energy around it. Some people say that it is on a ley line. I have found it to be a really amazing place. I've seen in Portugal, I've seen places, sort of ancient Roman empires, and there's just something about the seeing an ancient structure and imagining the ancient people who used to live here and a thriving sort of village or city at 18,000 people. This was the king's residence, and as I said, there are sort of up to 200 smaller sites scattered around the area. So Great Zimbabwe is it's a UNESCO heritage site, and it's absolutely a must-see when you come to Zimbabwe.
Well, it sounds to me so far from what you've shared with us today that UNESCO has spent a lot of time in Zimbabwe. That's the first thing that I've recognised. The other thing I'd like to ask you is, with all these ancient ruins and places that you've been talking about and sites, is it one of those places in the world where a lot of archaeologists come to visit?
Well, when I say to people, do you know that where the largest ancient man-made structure in Sub-Sahara is, they're like, huh? There's an ancient structure in Sub-Saharan Africa? Because the false impression that the colonialists gave was that there was nothing worthwhile in Africa. Only what they brought was worthwhile. And that's not true, because there are kingdoms and there's a great, immense history that predates colonialism that really I'm always encouraging people to write about their histories of their countries and their tribes and their areas and their kingdoms, because there's so much to discover in Africa. So yes, there are architects, but certainly it's not, everybody goes to South America, or Rome or Europe to do Roman sort of thing. So people, it's kind of like I think just people just don't know enough about it. That's all.
Yeah, that's really good, and I'm so pleased that you've shared that with us today. Look, we're rushing through our time, so I don't want to stop you from telling us about some other amazing places that we should visit in Zimbabwe.
Okay, so that's really, so from Great Zimbabwe you can go back to Bulawayo and you can fly out of Bulawayo, or you can fly back to Harare to Victoria Falls, or you can fly to Harare. Or from Bulawayo, you can fly to Johannesburg. So from Bulawayo, you're well connected to anywhere else that you need to go. And you can also go back up to the Victoria Falls if you needed to do that. So that's really the end of the little tour that I wanted to take you on, which really encompasses mostly the southwest, the sort of western side of the country. But if you went to the east, I'll just mention a few places that are worth visiting. In the east, down in the southeast, there is the Gonera Zoo Nature Reserve and Wildlife Park, which is very unique landscape, just very stunning and also filled with wildlife. Further, if you travel from the southeast, further up the eastern side, we have the Chimanimani Mountains. And then, so beautiful mountains, suddenly, from our savannas, you enter green and amazing mountains. And then you can carry on up to the Vumba, which is also beautiful mountainous area. And then you would curve back to go to Harare. If you went further up from the Vumba, you went further up, from Harare you would go, like I said to you, Kariba. If you went to Kariba, you could go to Mana Pools. And Mana Pools is a unique site where you see lots of elephant as well, and very beautiful. I unfortunately have not yet been there, but I certainly hope to make it one of my bucket list stops.
What is your favourite travel destination within your own country?
I love the Matoba Hills. It's just such a vast open space. The rock formations never cease to amaze me. The ancient rock art, the fact that you glimpse animals in the bush. The fact that it's not far from home, it's one of the places I love. As well as I guess the route that I've shared with you is really my favorite route. So yeah, I've been a little bit biased.
That's good. That. So in total, how many days would we be talking about to do that route that you've just explained to us today without, chilling out, without being too stressed and doing it too quickly? How many days would you allow for that?
I would say that if you did a 10-day, planned a 10-day journey, you could fit all of that in very comfortably in 10 days. If you wanted to spend more time at any one of those destinations or do, spend any more time going to other destinations within the country, then obviously you would need to add on. So 2 weeks would certainly be doable. But 10 days, I think, is a very nice, sort of space of time to really get in some of the most amazing places on this planet, all in one country.
Yeah, and we really wanted to achieve that today, is to inspire people to go to Zimbabwe, because it may not well be on your bucket list, and it should be. And get in there and do 10 days, and then you'll be amazed, I'm sure, and want to go back and explore a lot of it. But Dot has really given us a fantastic insight today. Dot, thank you very much for that. Before I let you go today, I wanted to give you the opportunity to put a bit of a plug out for your upcoming book that's coming out.
Yes, many people, I sort of did this 8.5-month journey over 20,000 kilometers through 18 African countries. And a lot of people joined me late on the journey. I did post a number of things on Facebook when I could. So I've been asked to write the book by many, many people. And I'm almost, the end is, let's put it, the light at the end is at the end of the tunnel. I can see it. So my book will be, my journey, I call my journey Going Home to Africa, which can be found on Facebook and Instagram. But my book will also be called Going Home to Africa. Yes, thank you. That's my book coming up, I would guess, hopefully I'll finish before the quarantine ends.
Well, I tell you what we're going to do, because I know very personally what it's like to write a book, and I'm sure the journey of doing the book has been just as fascinating for you as it has been doing the actual journey to get the content for your book. I'd like to put you on the spot today, suggest that you give me a copy of the book to give away to one of my listeners on the show.
I would be absolutely delighted to do that. Thank you. I would be absolutely delighted.
I would love to give one of my listeners somewhere in the world the opportunity to read Dot's book when it comes out, and then I'm sure be inspired to go to Africa, and not necessarily follow in her footsteps, but at least maybe to go and visit some of the places that she writes about. Dot, I'm going to put all the links to your Facebook and everything else in the show notes today, so people, if they have got questions and you're happy for them to reach out to you, then you can answer anything they can. And let's see whether we can stimulate a little bit of tourism for Zimbabwe as a result of doing this show, because you've done a fantastic job today.
Thank you so much. And we do need tourists. Our times are economically challenging, and tourism really helps people, as opposed to other countries where, it's tourism. Here, I promise you, every single person that comes, we value exceptionally.
So there you go. So when the travel ban is over, make sure you plan already your trip to Zimbabwe, and you've got no excuses now, because Dot's just given you a 10-day itinerary to go and follow. So Dot, thanks very much for coming back on the show, and I know it's not going to be the last time, so looking forward to the next time that you and I can have a chat.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate your time and your invitation, and I love the podcasts that you put out. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. We'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the incredible Dot Becker speaking to me from Bulawayo in beautiful Zimbabwe, and I'm sure after you've listened to that, you'd love to go to Zimbabwe to check out wonderful places like Victoria Falls and the game parks and everything else that she mentioned during that episode. Absolutely fantastic. Dot, I am in awe of you. You're an amazing woman. You're an ambassador for your country, you're an ambassador for your continent, and you're an ambassador for women all over the world. Extraordinary human being, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on my show today. If you like what you hear on the Global Travel Channel, then there's plenty of more episodes for you to find at www.globaltravelchannel.com. Over 120 episodes for you to choose from, and everybody has an amazing travel story to share on my show. If you like it that much, tell a friend, a family member, or even a work colleague about the show. We want to get as many people around the world as we can listening to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. And if you think you'd like to be a guest on the show and you've got a great travel story, get in touch with me. Who knows, you could be on the show very shortly telling the world about your amazing travel adventures. Okay, well, that's about it for me in this episode. My name's Mark Philpott, and until we meet again, I wish you all a very happy and safe week ahead.